Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And we're talking today about jumping in during fast-moving conversations. And so this, Shannon, is a great topic for you to contribute, and I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this conversation today because as an improviser, as an improv expert, you have a lot of experience in exactly these kinds of situations and coaching people on these kinds of skills to be able to jump in and be more assertive and more engaging in these kinds of fast-moving dynamics. So I have some thoughts on how to do this for people that have trouble jumping in or getting their voice heard in a professional setting. Could be other situations too, but mostly in a professional setting in the workplace. And I'm interested to hear some of your thoughts as well.
Yeah, so let's start with just pure improv, okay? And I love our conversations because anytime I put something out there, you grab it and we connect it just perfectly. So let's start with this. There's a game. First off, hi, I'm Shannon. I'm Shannon Stott. My work is full of improv. I coach and direct and teach improv with improv on and off the stage. And there is a game in improv that we do where people stand in line. So I would be at the front of like you would stand in line at a coffee shop, right? And people are behind me. And what happens is I start telling a story. Once upon a time, there was a boy and the boy loved cheese and cheese every day he had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. At any given time, anyone that's behind me can tap me on the shoulder and I move to the back of the line and they come to the front of the line and they pick up exactly where I left off. The boy's mom made cheese every day, whatever it is. And we get faster and faster, we get slower, we do all sorts of things. So the thing about this game is what you'll see in improvisers or anyone who plays this game is that the first person will talk and they'll continue to talk about the boy and his cheese and whatnot. And the person behind them will do this thing where they lean in with their hand hovering over the person's shoulder, just waiting, I guess.
Waiting for something.
Waiting. Yeah. So they're waiting and they're waiting for a break. They're waiting for a time to jump in. They're waiting for their own inspiration to kick in. And usually what I have to do is coach this person, all improvisers, right? I have to coach them to change their mindset. The person in front, especially if they're me or any improviser who has any practice, the person in front is going to just continue to talk. They're going to continue to talk because that's the name of the game. The name of the game is telling a story. That's what we're doing here. And they're not really worried about you sometimes. Your job, though, in this game is to tap in. You have to tap in for everyone else to get to play. So I'm usually coaching two things. One, we don't wait. It's your turn. It's always your turn. Take your turn, tap that person on the shoulder, let them out. And two, remember that they are also improvising. I may look like I have lots to say about the boy and his cheese and whatever it is that I'm talking about. And they went to the market and there was no money and I can make up things forever. That's my job, right? But it doesn't mean that I don't need help. So if we can keep these two things in our mind, especially for the stage, if we can keep these two things in our mind, one, it's always your turn, tap in. Two, that person doesn't have any more information than you have. You need to save them and get in yourself. Either way, it ends with you tapping in, you butting in, talking in, or jumping in to fast-moving conversation, right?
Yeah. I think you're touching on something important, which is getting into spectator mode.
Yes.
Which is what we often do in these situations. And when you're in spectator mode, and that's kind of your default mode, that's a different part of the brain than speaking mode or lecturing mode, or however you want to think of it. Listening and processing and observing versus jumping in and volunteering or sharing. And they do feed off of each other, but they're just different functions. So when people are very stuck in that observation spectator mode, they're less likely to take the plunge. And so like you say, it's a muscle that you have to train just to jump in, just to say something, or just to, physically, in this case, with the improv game, physically move into that situation. And then you'll figure it out as you go along.
Right.
And having the confidence in yourself that you can start saying something without necessarily knowing how it's going to end or where the conversation is going to go from there. But you have confidence in yourself that you'll be able to perform regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And then the confidence is also related to what you mentioned about like you're supposed to be here, right? That no one is higher authority than you. If we're talking about a collaborative discussion, oftentimes in meetings, certain people outrank other people. But even so, if the purpose of the meeting is for people to contribute, and you're there and you know that that's the norm for someone like you to contribute and to jump in, then you should have that confidence and conviction that you're supposed to be there and you have something to offer, even if other people seem very confident and very certain about what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. This idea that how do I build that confidence? What do I say? If someone is talking, I don't want to be rude, right? How do I jump in if I'm not trying to be rude? Some of the things that we train in improv, and we don't do this, okay? But one of the things that we train in improv in that game is to make a noise, right? Like, ooh, right, as you're tapping. So you're engaging, ooh, right? If we take that noise and we put it into words, you can change that noise into words like, that's right, Justin, right? This is a cue. I am agreeing with you. And now I have something to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or that's really interesting. Or there are a myriad of phrases that you can use so you don't feel like you're just suddenly speaking your mind. You're agreeing with the person, letting the audience, which is your boardroom, your peers, know that you're agreeing or you have something to say, and
Right.
now you have the floor so you can speak up.
Yeah, I call it vocalizing,
Mm-hmm.
making some kind of a sound. You wouldn't do it in a cartoonish way like in that extreme example,
Ooh.
but that is a good game, in an improv context, just for training purposes.
Mm-hmm.
But in the real world, it's like, right, right, yeah, exactly, yep. Oh wow, cool. Making those kinds of sounds sends a signal to the room, like you said, that you're about to say something. It's like putting on your turn signal on the highway, letting everybody
Right.
know that you're going to change lanes. You don't just change lanes out of the blue. You kind of announce it beforehand so people can mentally prepare.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same idea. Whereas if you say nothing or make no sound, that also communicates something to the room. It communicates that I have nothing to say. I'm not going to
Right.
say anything in the next 3 or 5 seconds or 8 seconds. So you all can continue talking however you want. But if I
Mm-hmm.
start vocalizing, then I'm subtly indicating that, hey, I'm ramping up here. I'm about to jump in. So that makes it not as disruptive when you do finally start making a statement.
Yeah. There's this idea that if we are quiet, other people will recognize, oh, Shannon hasn't spoken in a while. Let Shannon have the floor. But as animals in the wild, right, we don't let other things at our meat. We are not just
Mm-hmm.
sitting around letting people speak over us. We want to be heard, especially in a space like this. So if I love this vocalization, this idea of making sound, making a movement. We also do things where if you have nothing, move move. So tap that person out, start to dance. Now, please don't dance in your boardroom unless it's a dancing boardroom, but it's the same thing as moving forward, leaning in. And I'm imagining people at a table, right? When you lean in to whoever it is that is speaking, or while someone is speaking, people also recognize that motion
Mm-hmm.
as, oh, so Shannon has something to say. I also
Yeah.
want to point out that waiting begets waiting, right? So once especially on the stage, you'll see that people have an idea. They instinctively move forward, and then they second guess themselves and they move back. Their brain tells them, oh, that thing you're about to say is stupid. That thing you're about to say, don't say that. Like, don't embarrass yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I am constantly in the mode of training people to follow that motion, because that, like I said, waiting begets waiting, silence begets silence. If you are silent and you think to yourself, oh, I'll say something in just a second, that just a second will have passed and we're on to the next conversation piece. And it's very difficult to let something pass and then backtrack and try to talk about
Oh,
it
sure.
after
Yeah,
the moment.
absolutely. Yeah, that's 100% true. You have to jump in when the opportunity is there.
Mm-hmm.
You can't wait, 5 minutes later in the conversation. Hey, I just want to go back to something we talked about earlier. You could do that. Sometimes it works, but it's usually not as effective as
Mm-hmm.
getting in there right as the ideas are being formed. If
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about a collaborative discussion or brainstorming session, or it could be a strategy discussion, but it's still collaborative in nature.
Mm-hmm.
you know Once the group has kind of decided in the group wisdom that we're done with that topic, it's very hard for one lone individual to then come back later on and say, hey, let's just update and edit something that we talked about half an hour ago.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a natural resistance to that. So that's a good point. Now, one thing that I do, and I want to get your input on this, I do tell people is to notice gaps in the conversation and lulls in the conversation. When there seems to be a lull in energy, that's an opportunity for you to jump in. But that requires you to kind of get into the rhythm
Mm-hmm.
and to feel the energy and the flow of the conversation. If you just observe closely people talking, you will notice that there's fast periods in the conversation and slow periods. And there's periods of dense conversation, dense information being shared back and forth. And then there's much less dense periods. And it's in those less dense, less information heavy moments that you can much more easily jump in. However, you're making the point that you don't want to kind of wait permission, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
wait your turn. So I think it's valuable for people to practice their observation skills, to really get in the rhythm and to get a sense of where this conversation is flowing, what's the energy level. Oh, there's kind of a lonely energy right now. Boom, this is my chance to jump in.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that? Would you say that that's being too hesitant, that you should just kind of, or is it a balance? How do you kind of think about that?
This is great. I love this. So obviously everything is a balance, right? And so I have all sorts of activities that we do, but there's another warm-up activity that we do where we have the entire class. So it could be up to it's 15, 20, 30 people, right? Walk around in a space. When we were out walking around in spaces together, words towards 30 people, but we walk around in a space. And the idea is that at any given moment, everyone in the room will jump. We're not jumping too high, but we're like hopping and landing at the same time. And usually we're on stage, so the stage is usually wooden. It sounds like something. Even if you're on the ground, it sounds like something, and you can hear the difference between and right, where people are landing at different times. The idea is the exact thing that you're saying. Sometimes the group is moving fast. Sometimes the group is moving very slowly. It is up to all of us to keep an eye on where we can feel the energy ramping up for this collective jump, for this collective lift off the floor and landing together. And it's the same thing in a conversation, right? We're looking for this collective pause. Where are we in the conversation? Where is so and so finished speaking? Is so and so ramping up? Like, where do I fit in? How do I fit in? And even even this idea of, yes, it's always your turn. Yes, it is always your turn. It is your turn to speak. You should get your idea out. But yes, there is also this balance of, okay, well, where are we in the conversation? Has this conversation lulled? Has that idea been played out? Have we talked too much about it? How
Mhm.
can we jump at the same time? Where do I fit in? And usually, honestly, there's often this feeling of a leader in those jumps. You can see it. Sometimes people are walking around, and the leader isn't always the same person, right?
Right.
And that's how conversations work. The leader always isn't the same person, and it's not a person that's saying, "I'm the leader now." This is a silent exercise. So what happens is people get to become aware of, all right, I sort of followed so and so before. Who do I follow now? Oh, it
Yeah.
looks like people are following me now.
Right.
So let me lead, right? And you'll find that balance.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I think of that as observation and listening skills ultimately, and honing those. And if you can hone those and get really good at those skills, which we talk a lot about in communication and influence, is the ability to listen and the ability to pick up on the
Wow.
cues that people are giving you, you're going to perform much better. I like to give the example of someone who just says something randomly in a conversation, and everybody is like, just turns at the person and is like, where did that come from? Why did that happen? Because that person had some thing in their head that they really wanted to say,
Mhm.
but it was totally out of sync with everybody else. And so that's when you can kind of lose momentum. So Nan has a question. What's the best way to jump in? I don't quite see. Maybe she clarified when the person is speaking very loudly. I see. Okay. Yeah. What's the best way to jump in when the person is speaking very loudly and doesn't let others talk?
Mhm.
Um, so first of, this is a sneaky trick I'm going to give you, but everybody has to breathe, right? Your voice is nothing more than air particles vibrating against each other. So by definition, no air means no voice. So therefore, everybody has to breathe at some point as they're speaking. Some people have bigger lung capacity than others, but at some point as they're speaking, they're going to have to pause to take a breath for like half a second. That is your chance to jump in. And this is like break in case of an emergency, right? If it's just totally egregious, if the person is just absolutely ridiculous, they're not responding to the physical cues, they're not responding to the vocalization, they have no social intelligence or social awareness. Your last resort is the person has to breathe. You know that for sure. They're going to have to pause at some point to take a breath in. And so that's your opportunity right there to start speaking. And then when you start speaking, don't stop. And this is what I encourage people to do, because a lot of times you start saying something and then you kind of get some cue from somebody in the room and then you close up again. Because you say, okay, this more aggressive person is now trying to jump back in. No, start speaking and then don't stop. Complete your statement. And just that momentum in and of itself will reduce the likelihood that other people will jump in on you or disrupt you.
Mhm. Yeah, there is there. That's a great question, Nan. There are a couple of things. I love those and these. One, agreeing with someone or asking them to clarify, not asking them a question, but saying things like in the middle of them speaking, right? They're talking, and you can even act like you don't understand. You don't have to act like that, but you can say, Justin, you just repeat their name. Justin, hold on a second. What you said just then, what I'm hearing is,
Mm-hmm.
and then repeat what they're saying and then put your idea on top of it,
Right.
right? So they're talking about whatever it is. I really think that we should all go to Nantucket for the get away, and these are the reasons why. And Shannon, what I'm hearing you say is that you really like Nantucket. It's interesting that you would say that, because actually I had this vision, that we would go somewhere like Nantucket, like the beach, or
Mhm.
a city, New York, whatever it is. That this way you've grabbed a little bit of their attention, you've repeated what they've said. This indicates that you're listening, and then you can actually sort of steer the conversation in a way that you have a chance to add. The second part
Mhm.
about that is you can also, especially if there's somebody who is, once they have the mic or once they have the floor, they just continue. If you have the wherewithal, move asking someone else what they think is also very helpful. So you can interrupt Shannon. Shannon, what I hear you say is that you really want to go to Nantucket. I really love Nantucket. I also love places like New York. Isn't that right, Justin? Weren't you just talking about a place in New York that you really love? And this gives you the power of, you've gotten your thing out, but now you've also shifted the conversation to Justin, who hasn't had a chance to speak because this other
Right.
person has been speaking. And so if
And
we can play that, we can play that tennis, right? Because
mhm.
Justin can do the same thing. What do you think, Mark, or Betty, or whatever it is?
Just by virtue of you pivoting the conversation, pivoting the spotlight to someone else,
Mm-hmm.
that also sets you up as a leader in the
Mm-hmm.
conversation.
Yes.
And so you're communicating just through your behavior and through your actions. You being the leader, maybe you say 5 words, but those 5 words are, I want to hear from Shannon now. Let's hear from this person, right? Only
Mm-hmm.
leaders do that, right? So people who are not in leadership positions, they want to talk, they want to be heard. The leader
Mm-hmm.
is much more likely to give their perspective, but also to welcome and to encourage other people to contribute as well.
Yeah.
So that's a psychological dynamic. A couple other things that I'll mention here. Don't wear out your welcome.
Mm.
So, if it's a fast moving conversation, everybody wants to get in, everybody wants to say something. So if everybody is speaking, let's say in 100-word bursts, and then you jump in and you want to drone on for 500 words, 5 times longer than everybody else, it's like, that's not going to fly. You're not going to get away with that. Somebody is going to try to encroach on you. And so the problem here is twofold. Number one, you don't want to set yourself up to be interrupted. Some interruptions are fine, but you don't want to invite that by going too long or droning on too much. And secondly, people will tune out, right? You're going to turn people off because you're sending the signal to everybody, hey, every time I speak, just so everybody knows, you don't have to listen to me because I'm just going to keep rambling for 5 minutes. That's a signal that you're sending
Mm-hmm.
when you're out of sync with the group. So if the norm is in that 50 to 100 word range, let's say, quick, short statements, you want to kind of abide by that same range. You don't want to go too long. That being said, vice versa. If everybody is making very long, detailed statements or commentary in the same way, if you're the one person who says just one quick little snippet, you're kind of out of sync with the group. But whatever it is, you don't want to wear out your welcome. And that's how you maintain your influence and your persuasion in those situations.
Mm-hmm. I really love, it's the same idea that we've been speaking about, right? What is the flow of the group? Where are we all jumping together, right? Where do we all jump? Where do we all land? And when does that happen? When is it my
Yeah.
turn? And the same thing that you said, this idea of power, or this idea of being in charge or a leader, right? Even when you are done, right? When Justin and I are talking now, there's only 2 of us. So when Justin stops talking, it's probably my turn to speak. Like, there's no one else here. But if you are in a group and you can sense that you are done speaking, you can ask someone else to speak. And it's so helpful, especially if you know that person or you have a question. you can ask them to join in that conversation, and it does put you in a leadership role. It makes people feel like that you are listening, and that when you are speaking, you know that you should be respected in what you say, because you're going to give it to someone else. And you see, I mean, you see it in doggone, what am I thinking of? The news, right? The news, like the news, it happens like that all the time, because they need to signal, like, I am done speaking. Now you speak. If you watch the news, my goodness, there's like so many amazing ways, especially during debates, how people get in, how people get out, how people shift conversations. It's lovely to watch. But that idea of saying, that's what I feel about it. What do you think, Justin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's thank you for that that pivot right there. There's some newscasters and anchors that do it well, and others that don't do it that well, and you can learn from both. You know, what are the ones that it seems to be like really smooth and easy for everybody in the conversation, versus those that are like really disruptive and just kind of something is off in that dynamic. Be comfortable with crosstalk, and be comfortable with people jumping in as you're speaking. I kind of alluded to this earlier. You know, oftentimes I've seen that people are so precious with their idea. Like, I have this great idea that I can't wait to share with everybody. And they start talking and they start explicating their big analysis. And then somebody jumps in and interrupts them. It's like, oh, what? Come on, man. Right?
Yeah.
I had something really good. I was building up to something really great. So we talk a lot about concise speaking, keeping it short and sweet, not wearing out your welcome. And just as you have a need oftentimes to jump in on other people will need to jump in on you sometimes in these fast moving conversations. And so I think being comfortable with that is very important, because I've seen it many times. People just have some kind of emotional reaction when someone else jumps in. It's like, it's no big deal. Everybody's trying to share their ideas, right? That's the norm in that environment. So a lot of people assume that these conversations should be like, one person finishes talking nice and easy, and then the next person begins, continues, finishes. Everybody waits their turn, and it's nice and clean, and everybody abides by the time limit, and everybody is like nice school children, you know, disciplined. That's not the real world, right? The real world is much more messy. So you have to be willing to kind of get into that situation, you know, bump up against people, and that's okay.
Yeah, I 100% agree. If you can read the room, if you can find the confidence really to jump in and know that it's your turn to speak, if you can be the leader in passing off conversation, like, people are going to enjoy having conversation with you, and people are going to respect when you speak, because they understand that you understand how to move through a fast-paced conversation or idea workshop, right?